There is a line in Seneca's private letters that was almost never published. It is only one sentence. But when you read it, something shifts inside you. You start watching the people around you differently. You hear what is really being said beneath the pleasantries, and you cannot go back to the way you saw things before. That sentence is in this video, and by the end, you will understand why it was kept hidden for so long. Most of what you have been told about Stoicism is a polished, comfortable version of the truth. The internet will give you marble statues, motivational quotes over sunset backgrounds. Control what you can control. Be grateful. Stay disciplined. And none of that is wrong, but it is incomplete, dangerously incomplete. Because the Stoics did not just write about gratitude and morning routines. They wrote about betrayal, about the darkness that lives inside people who smile at you, about why your closest friends will abandon their own values the moment it becomes inconvenient to keep them, about the terrifying truth that most people do not actually want you to succeed, even the ones who say they do. These were not the lessons they shared in public lectures. These were the ones they wrote in private. Letters that were never meant to be read by the masses. Journal entries that were never meant to leave the room. Marcus Aurelius wrote meditations for himself. Not for you, not for Instagram. For his own eyes, in the dark hours of the night, when the performance of being emperor was over and the honest work of understanding people began. Seneca's most revealing letters were written to one man, Lucilius. And some of those letters contained observations so sharp, so uncomfortably accurate about human nature that scholars have debated for centuries whether they should even be taught. Epictetus taught in a small school in rural Greece. His lectures were transcribed by a single student, and some of what he said in that room was so blunt about the human condition that it makes modern self-help sound like a bedtime story. Today, you are going to hear 4 of those truths. Not the comfortable ones, not the ones that make you feel warm and motivated, the ones that, once you understand them, change the way you see every relationship, every conversation, and every person you thought you knew. This is the first episode of Forbidden Meditations, and it starts with the hardest truth of all. Think about the last time you shared good news with someone. Maybe you got a promotion. Maybe you started a new project. Maybe you simply told someone about a goal you were working toward. Now think carefully, not about what they said, about what you felt. Did their congratulations feel full, or did something feel slightly hollow? Did their smile reach their eyes? Or was there a pause, just a fraction of a second too long before they responded? Most people will never say it out loud. They will never admit it, not even to themselves. But there is a reaction that happens inside the human mind when someone close to them succeeds, and it is not always joy. Seneca saw this clearly. 2,000 years ago, he wrote about it with a precision that still cuts. In his letter to Lucilius, Seneca wrote something that most people skip over. He said, "It is not that people wish you harm. It is that your success reminds them of their own inaction. And that reminder is a wound they did not ask for." Read that again, because it changes everything about how you interpret the people around you. Seneca is not saying your friends are evil. He is not saying they are plotting against you. He is saying something far more uncomfortable than that. He is saying that your growth, your ambition, the very act of you trying to become something more, creates a mirror that forces other people to look at themselves. And most people do not want to look. When you start waking up early and someone mocks your routine, they are not mocking your routine. They are reacting to the fact that your discipline exposes their lack of it. When you share a goal and someone tells you to be realistic, they are not protecting you. They are protecting themselves from the discomfort of watching you try something they are too afraid to attempt. When you succeed at something and a friend's reaction feels flat, they are not being rude. They are processing the fact that your achievement has just widened the gap between where they are and where they told themselves they would be by now. This is not malice. It is human nature, and the Stoics understood it better than anyone. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, Book 6, "When you wake in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." This is the most powerful man in the known world, a man surrounded by generals, senators, and advisors, and every single morning he reminded himself that the people closest to him were capable of pettiness, envy, and dishonesty. Not because he was cynical, but because he understood that seeing people clearly is the foundation of dealing with them wisely. Most people go through life expecting the best from everyone and then feeling devastated when reality falls short. The Stoics did the opposite. They expected the full range of human behavior, including the ugly parts, so that nothing could surprise them and nothing could hurt them. Marcus did not write that passage in anger. He wrote it with calm clarity. It was preparation. It was armor. It was the intellectual honesty that most people are too afraid to practice. So what do you do with this truth? You do not become paranoid. You do not start seeing enemies everywhere. You do not cut people off or become cold. You do something far more powerful. You stop being surprised. When someone reacts strangely to your success, you understand why. When someone discourages your ambition, you recognize the mechanism. When a friendship starts to feel different after you change your life, you do not blame yourself. You see the pattern. Epictetus taught that most of our suffering comes from the gap between what we expect and what actually happens. When you expect people to always celebrate your growth, you set yourself up for disappointment. When you understand that growth can be threatening to others, you remove that gap entirely. This does not make you cynical. It makes you compassionate. Because once you understand why people react the way they do, you can stop taking it personally. You can love them without needing them to be perfect. You can share your life without needing their approval. And that is a kind of freedom most people will never experience, because they are still waiting for the world to be what they wish it were, instead of seeing it for what it is. The Stoics called this seeing with clear eyes, and it begins the moment you accept this first truth. There is something deeply unsettling that happens when you watch someone you admire break their own principles. Not a stranger, not a politician on television, someone close to you, someone you trusted, someone whose character you would have defended to anyone who questioned it. And then one day, under pressure, under temptation, under the right circumstances, they do the exact thing they always said they would never do. They cut a corner they swore was uncuttable. They abandon a belief they claimed was unshakable. They treat someone in a way they always condemned. And it is not the action itself that haunts you. It is the realization that the person you thought you knew might never have existed at all. Marcus Aurelius dealt with this his entire life, and what he wrote about it is one of the most overlooked passages in all of Stoic philosophy. In Meditations, Book 9, Marcus wrote, "Do not be surprised when those who profess virtue fail to practice it. They were never speaking of who they are. They were speaking of who they wish to be." This is devastatingly honest, because it exposes something most people refuse to accept, that words and character are not the same thing. A person can talk about loyalty for years and abandon you the moment loyalty becomes expensive. A person can preach honesty while lying to themselves every day about who they really are. A person can build an entire identity around a value that they have never actually been tested on, because most people have not been tested. Not truly. Not in the way that reveals what they are actually made of. Marcus understood this because he ruled an empire during one of its most chaotic periods. The Antonine Plague was killing millions. Germanic tribes were invading the borders. His own generals were plotting against him, and the people closest to him, the advisors, the senators, the friends he had known for decades, began making choices based on survival, not on principle. He watched loyalty evaporate under pressure. He watched integrity melt the moment the cost of maintaining it became real, and he did not write about it with bitterness. He wrote about it with the calm understanding of a man who had stopped expecting consistency from an inconsistent species. Epictetus put it even more bluntly. He taught that a person's character is not revealed by what they say in comfort. It is revealed by what they do under stress. Everything else is a rehearsal. Think about that word, rehearsal. It means that the version of someone you see when life is easy, when there is no pressure, no temptation, no cost, is not the real person. It is a rehearsal, a performance of who they want to be. The real version shows up when there is something to lose, when telling the truth costs them a friendship, when doing the right thing costs them money, when being loyal costs them comfort. Epictetus did not teach this to make his students distrust everyone. He taught it so they would stop building their emotional foundation on other people's performances. Because if your peace depends on someone being who they say they are, and then they turn out to be human, you lose everything. Not because of what they did, but because of what you expected them to be. The Stoic response to this truth is not to trust no one. It is to understand the nature of trust itself. Seneca wrote, "Trust but not blindly, love but not recklessly. Expect the best from people, but build your life so that you can survive the worst." This is emotional intelligence at its highest level. It means you can have deep, meaningful relationships while accepting that every human being, including you, is capable of failing their own standards. When a friend disappoints you, you do not shatter. You understand that they are human, and humans are inconsistent. When someone you trust lets you down, you do not harden yourself against all connection. You adjust your expectations to match reality. This is not pessimism. This is the most mature form of love there is. Loving people for who they actually are, not for the version of themselves they perform on good days. Marcus Aurelius remained deeply connected to the people in his life, even after watching many of them fail their own principles. He did not become bitter, he became realistic. And that realism gave him a kind of peace that idealism never could. If you are starting to see things differently, and these truths are landing somewhere deep, subscribe to this channel. This is the first episode of Forbidden Meditations, and what comes next goes even further. This is the truth that changes everything, and it is the one that almost nobody wants to hear. Most people say they want freedom. They say they want to quit the job they hate, leave the relationship that drains them, break free from the expectations that suffocate them, build the life they actually want instead of the one that was handed to them. But watch what they do, not what they say. What they do. They stay. Year after year after year, they stay in the life they claim to hate. And it is not because they cannot leave. It is not because the chains are too strong or the walls are too high. It is because freedom is terrifying. And most people would rather be comfortable prisoners than uncomfortable free people. Epictetus understood this in a way that most philosophers never could, because Epictetus was born a slave. He knew what literal chains felt like. And when he was finally freed, he saw something that most freed people never talk about, the terror of having no one to blame. Epictetus taught that when a man is enslaved, he has a strange comfort. He can blame his master for everything. His circumstances are not his fault. His limitations are not his responsibility. His suffering has a clear external cause. But when that man is freed, everything changes. Suddenly, there is no one to blame. If his life is empty, that is on him. If he does not know what to do with himself, that is his problem. If he fails, there is no master, no system, no oppressor standing between him and the truth that he simply was not good enough, or did not try hard enough, or did not know who he was without the structure that imprisoned him. This, Epictetus said, is why so many freed slaves returned to their masters. Not because they loved slavery, but because freedom without direction is more frightening than captivity with structure. And now translate that to your life. How many people stay in jobs they despise because the structure gives them identity? How many people remain in relationships that have been dead for years because being alone means facing themselves? How many people follow a path someone else chose for them because the alternative, choosing for themselves, means accepting full responsibility for the outcome? The chains are not physical. They are psychological. And they are self-imposed. Seneca wrote about this too, from a very different angle. He said, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality." The fear of freedom is not a fear of what will happen. It is a fear of what might happen. The fear of failure, the fear of loneliness, the fear of discovering that without the labels, the titles, the routines, and the relationships that define you, there might be nothing underneath. That is the real terror. Not that freedom is dangerous, but that freedom requires you to know who you are. And most people have spent their entire lives avoiding that question. Marcus Aurelius, despite being emperor, wrote about this struggle constantly. He had more freedom than any human being on earth, and yet his journals reveal a man who wrestled every night with the question of whether he was living his own life or performing one that had been chosen for him. If the most powerful man alive struggled with this, what makes you think the average person does not? The Stoic answer is not to leap blindly into freedom. It is to start with self-knowledge. Epictetus taught that before you can be free externally, you must become free internally. Free from the opinions of others, free from the need for approval, free from the fear of failure, free from the story you have been telling yourself about why you cannot change. This is the hardest work a human being can do. It is harder than any job, any relationship, any external challenge, because the opponent is not out there. The opponent is the version of you that would rather be comfortable than honest. Freedom is not the absence of chains. It is the willingness to walk forward when there is nothing holding you in place except your own fear. And the moment you understand that, truly understand it, you will see that most of the people around you are choosing their prisons every single day. This is the truth that Seneca almost did not write, the one that makes people uncomfortable in a way they cannot quite explain, because it does not attack bad people, it questions the good ones. Ask yourself this: how much of your goodness is actually goodness, and how much of it is just fear? You do not steal, but is that because you believe stealing is wrong, or because you are afraid of being caught? You do not lie, but is that because you value truth, or because you are afraid of the consequences if the lie unravels? You are kind to people, but is that because kindness lives in your bones, or because you are afraid of what people would think if you were not? Most people have never sat with these questions, and the Stoics believe that until you do not actually know who you are. Seneca, in one of his most provocative letters, wrote, "Remove the fear of punishment, and you will see the true character of mankind." This is the sentence from the cold open. And it is the most dangerous idea in all of Stoic philosophy, because it does not just apply to criminals, it applies to everyone. It applies to the colleague who is only honest because they know there is an audit trail. It applies to the partner who is only faithful because they are afraid of being caught. It applies to the person who is only generous when other people are watching. Seneca saw that society runs on incentives and consequences, not on virtue. And most people's goodness is actually just a rational response to the threat of punishment. This does not mean everyone is secretly evil, but it does mean that the gap between a good person and a bad person is often much smaller than we want to believe. The difference is not always in their character. Sometimes it is only in their circumstances. Marcus Aurelius extended this idea even further. He wrote that virtue must be tested to be real. An untested virtue is not virtue. It is merely the absence of temptation. Think about someone who has never been offered a bribe. You might call them honest, but are they? They have never been put in a position where dishonesty would benefit them. Their honesty has cost them nothing. It has not been tested. Now think about someone who was offered everything they wanted in exchange for compromising their principles. And they said no, not because anyone was watching, not because they would be caught, but because they knew who they were. That is the difference the Stoics cared about, not the appearance of virtue, the substance of it. Not what you do when the world is watching, what you do when it is not. Epictetus taught his students to test themselves constantly. Put yourself in uncomfortable positions. Face temptation willingly. Not so you can prove something to others, but so you can prove something to yourself. Because if you have never been tested, you do not know your own character. You only know your reputation. And reputation is what other people think of you. Character is what you do in the dark. So the question this truth leaves you with is not about other people, it is about you. Are you good because you are good, or are you good because it is easy? The Stoics did not ask this question to create guilt. They asked it to create clarity. Because once you understand the difference between fear-based morality and principle-based morality, you can start building the real thing. You stop doing the right thing because you are afraid of consequences. You start doing the right thing because it is who you are, not who you perform. That is the shift. And it is the most difficult, most honest, most liberating shift a human being can make. Seneca said that the goal of philosophy is not to make you look virtuous, it is to make you actually virtuous. And the difference between those two things is everything. You have now heard 4 truths that most Stoic content will never give you. That the people closest to you may struggle with your success. That even the best people you know are performing an untested version of themselves. That the freedom you say you want might be the very thing you are running from. And that your own goodness might be built on a foundation of fear rather than principle. These truths are not comfortable. They were never meant to be. But here is what the Stoics understood that most people miss. Comfort is not the goal. Clarity is. When you see people clearly, you stop being hurt by them. When you see yourself clearly, you stop being controlled by your own illusions. When you accept the world as it actually is instead of how you wish it were, something extraordinary happens. You become free. Not the comfortable kind of free, the real kind, the kind that costs something. The kind that most people will spend their entire lives avoiding. Marcus Aurelius wrote Meditations as a conversation with himself, not to become famous, not to inspire millions, but to force himself to look at the truth when every part of him wanted to look away. That is what Forbidden Meditations is about. Not the truths that make you feel good, the truths that make you see clearly. And seeing clearly is the beginning of everything. If this changed how you see the people around you, or how you see yourself, write the word truth in the comments. That way I will know this is the kind of content that needs to exist. This is episode 1 of Forbidden Meditations. The next episode goes somewhere even darker. Subscribe so you do not miss it. And if you want to start each morning with Stoic wisdom and guided reflections that build this kind of clarity, download Becoming Stoic. It is free on the App Store. The link is in the description. Remember, the truth is not always comfortable, but it is always free.